Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin the service in just a moment. If you would please take your seats. May I ask everybody, please turn your cell phones to silent. Again, please turn your cell phones to silent. The funeral service is going to be conducted by Rabbi Misha Tillman.
Before we begin the service, we shall perform a very ancient ritual, which is called Kriya in the Hebrew language. The ritual in question dates back to the biblical period of our history. In the text of the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, we find that whenever people received sad news, including those of a passing of a loved one, they would tear their clothes and put a dust upon their head as a sign of mourning. And the custom of rending a garment when a close relative departs from this world we retained in our community to this day. Therefore, at this time, I will tear the ribbon given to the son of the deceased. In the 20th century, in Germany, there was a great thinker, a famous philosopher, renowned philosopher, and a rabbi, whose name was Leo Beck. He lived a long life. In the course of his life, he experienced and was part of many major historical events, both world wars, but also the darkest period in the Jewish history, the time of the reign of the Nazis in Germany. In fact, he was the head of the German Jewish community during that period of time. He ended up in the concentration camp. Theresienstadt survived. And by the end of his life, he passed away in the 1950s. He was living in London. That was a time when he gave an interview in which he uttered a very simple, yet a very profound statement. He said, "Wir Juden wissen, es ist ein Gebot von Gott zu leben," which in English means, we Jews know that it is God's commandment to live. Now, think about this. He survived the camp, but he didn't say to survive. He didn't say to exist. He said to live. What he meant by that is, it is a duty of every person, of every human being. It is a sacred duty, as it is God's commandment, not just to be in this world, but to make an impact on this world, to live a meaningful life. And it is God's commandment. Today, my dear friends, we are here to honor our dear Zoya, who has fulfilled that commandment beautifully. For her life was truly meaningful. She made a difference. She made impact in this world. And you all know that Zoya did not become a person of fame or notoriety, nor did she win a Nobel Prize. But those things do not define the meaningfulness of one's life. It's just the way she influenced people around her, the way she loved the world, the way she rejoiced in life. All those things made her life meaningful and exemplary to all of us and each of us. And the brightest image of Zoya I have right now, a couple of days ago, back back in Felix Miller's house. That picture, that photograph, those of you who didn't see that, well, I'll tell you what that photograph is. A big photo of Zoya. She's standing there with a glass of whiskey and a cigar. Oh, she never smoked, by the way, for the record, she never smoked. But this is the ultimate expression of the joy of life. And she was about 90 at the time when the photograph was taken. About 90 at the time. Now that is the expression of zest for life. Or I'll put it, thirst for life. Yeah, zest, thirst for life. This is really, to me, at least personally, and I think many of you will concur, it's just the ultimate expression of who she was. Yeah. She emanated joy. She emanated positivity. And that is what carried her through for almost a century of our history that she lived. Almost a century. A few years. Less. I will talk about that a little bit. Now, in the course of our life, there's a question arises, okay, so we're supposed to meaningful life. How do you do that exactly? Well, in the course of our life, we go through various experiences, and by far, not all of them are positive. Some are quite painful and even tragic. Zoya's was no exception, and in fact, she lived through very horrible parts of our history, periods of our history. But the fact that we live through those different experiences simply means that it is our duty to make every experience count, to make life meaningful. And life consists of those events. We have to make those events count to make them meaningful. And that is what King Solomon, King Solomon taught us 3,000 years ago when he authored, according to the tradition, it was him who authored it, the book of Qohelet, Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, where he reflects on the nature of human existence in the world. לכל זמן ועת לכל חפש תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת ועת לקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת צפות ועת ריקוד, עת להשליך אבנים ועת כנוס אבנים, עת לכבות ועת לרחוק מהבק, עת לבקש ועת לאבד, עת לשמור ועת להשליך, עת לקרוא ועת לתפור, עת לחשות ועת לדבר. For everything there is a season and a time for every experience under the heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to discard. A time to rend and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. It is a time to speak. It is a time to celebrate Zoya's life. The life that was lived so beautifully. Zoya arrived in this world, and we had a discussion when exactly, but I can disclose the correct date. She was born in 1930. Zoya is Odessitka. I'm not going to translate that term. Okay? You should understand what it means. If you don't, then, oh, sorry, you never will. Because Odessit is something else. And technically speaking, strictly speaking, she wasn't born within the city limits of Odessa. She was born in a place called Petroverovka, which is not far. I'm not sure how many kilometers from Odessa it is, but that was the place where she was born. But she grew up in Odessa. And please note, the correct pronunciation of the city is Odessa, not Odessa. Odessa is a town in Texas. Odessa is one of the most unique places in this world, with its own culture and even with its own language. And Zoya was Odessitka in personality, in character, in her attitude. What does that mean? Well, first of all, the outlook on life is positive, but yet not without irony, not without sarcasm. Even though people think that Odessitic, people from Odessa, They have a sense of humor and joke all the time. Actually, they never do joke, they just live this way. So Zoya was a Jacinka. And it is an ability to be creative in whatever you do. And I will illustrate that with a few examples. But first, I would like to highlight the fact that Zoya belongs to that generation of our people whose young years, formative years, coincided with, as I mentioned earlier, the most tragic period of our history, the Великая Отечественная война, or as it is known here in the West, World War II. The tragedy of that war did not pass Zoya's family by, did not pass by her family. They managed to evacuate from Odessa. The Romanian forces were advancing quickly. I think within months the city has fallen. Initially it was the Romanians, the allies of Nazi Germany, that seized the city. The Germans came a little later. They evacuated to Central Asia, to Uzbekistan. And again, like many families, they lost their dear ones. Zoya's father died fighting the invaders, died fighting the enemy. When the city was liberated, they came back home in 1944. And that's when Zoya met Adinka, her beloved husband, Allah Shalom. May his memory be a blessing. Arkady was his full name. She never called him Arkady. Adinka. She was 16. He came from war. Adinka just came from war. He fought the Germans. She was 16 and they got married. A year later, she was blessed with a wonderful son, her only son, Felix. And we had that conversation the other day. Said, oh my goodness, she's 16, she already got married. Well, my friends, this was a different time. They had different life experiences. They had different aspirations that we do now. And we must remember that this was the generation of people that did what they must. They didn't necessarily do what they dreamed about. She loved Adinka, she fell in love with him, they had a wonderful family. She was a devoted wife, a lifetime, until Adinka's passing 10 years ago. But yes, maybe she could have gone to college later on and get a degree because she had a brilliant mind. And again, I'll talk about that a little later. Well, she finished 7 grades in Russia. Then later on, Felix was already more or less adult. She actually finished the high school. She even decided to start college. That didn't go very far with it. But yeah, she wanted to do. But again, it was all about what she must do. What she must do for the family. They needed to support each other, support themselves, and support one another. And that was that entire generation. They did what they must. So throughout her life, Zoya was a seamstress, a tailor. Shviya. And boy, she was good. She was amazing. She started that when she was 13. Again, she married 16, how early? Well, she was 13. That's like a bar mitzvah age nowadays, right? Boys only have their bar mitzvah, girls at 12. She was 13 when she started working, basically. That was that era, that was that time. That was that really amazing, heroic generation. And Zoya was one of those heroes. Now, not only was she a very skilled, a wonderful seamstress and a tailor, she worked, shall we say, by private appointment. But let me also remind you, those of you who lived long enough in the Soviet Union probably do understand that that type of approach to one's career and activities was strongly discouraged by the criminal code. So, but you know what? Honest job, she did nothing wrong. It was the criminal code that was wrong. She did nothing wrong. She worked hard. She was in great demand. She would make coats, shirts, everything. It was an honest work for which she got an honest pay. There was nothing wrong with it at all. And moreover, Вся Одесса, the whole city knew who she was and what she was doing. Nobody ever gave her away. Because, again, people knew what's right. Now, when the family came to the US in 1987, well, people that moved to the US at Zoya's age, quite obviously, a lot of times it was, a bit of a struggle, the stress, a new culture, new language, new everything to get a job. Well, she got it. She got it pretty quickly. She went to work. She worked in alterations. Was amazing and in high demand too. She was truly a master of her art. She worked until deep into her 70s. She worked till she's 70. I think she was 70 when she was retired. Like formally retired, because basically she continued to be active and doing things and making things for a long time. But she was like actively working until she was 70. And again, she was a hard worker. She had a brilliant mind. And what's really remarkable is that she was a very creative, she was very entrepreneurial. And let me illustrate that on a couple of examples. One from the Soviet Union, another one from here in the United States. So first, the Soviet Union story. Artur told me that one, because I wasn't in Odessa, I was in Moscow. Artur was in Odessa. He saw it. So she was working again by private, private appointments, shall we say. People placed orders with her. So she was able to produce several shirts a day. She was making shirts. So for each shirt, she would get paid 12 rubles. She could make 10 to 15 of them a day. So essentially, if you look at the salaries and wages that were average, typical for the Soviet Union, she could make in one day what an engineer could make in a month. That's pretty impressive. That's pretty good. And again, listen, she didn't steal that money. It was her work. She was just really that good. Now, the story from the United States. This is amazing. She came up with this idea she could make a geschäft out of nothing, out of thin air. So she was, well, obviously she was a senior. So she had access to kind of a social worker, somebody to come and check on her and all that. And certain visits per week are arranged by the program. Then eventually it turned out that that social work was not coming as frequently as she was supposed to be coming. And then it turned out that basically Zoya wanted to give the social work an opportunity to make some additional money on the side. But in exchange, some of the money she draws from taking care of Zoya, she would give to Zoya, and Zoya would have some extra cash. I mean, this is literally a geschäft out of thin air. That's amazing. I'm telling you, only Zoya could do this. No, it would never occur to me at least, So she knew how to live, I tell you that much. She knew how to live. And she knew how to rejoice in the beauty of life. Like, she was a lady of the old school, which means that, number one, her cooking was sublime. Number two, it was a lot of cooking, like a lot. Like people who lived through a period, if you ever visited, and again, I grew up in the household like that. When Russian come в гости, не в ресторан, в гости уходили, there is no empty space on the table. Все заставлено. Так должно быть. And there's got to be a lot of food on the table. And she cooked really well. Pumpkin strudel, pelmeni, that cannot be translated. Pelmeni. Somebody tried to tell me that pelmeni is ravioli. Nonsense. Pelmeni is pelmeni. Now, and last but not least, пряник для Милочки. she make a honey cookie, you know, especially for her daughter, every time. And Vadesi, back in the day, she would make her own wine. She would make her own samagon. Again, cannot be translated. Don't tell me it's moonshine. No, samagon is samagon. She would even make her own brandy. So she knew how to make her apartment, her place, her house, be a place where you could come, spend time, talk, eat, drink, just have a good time. Now, she was a person who devoted all of her life, all of her spiritual and physical strength to her family and to her loved ones. As I said, the tragedy of the war did not pass by Zoya, and as I said, her father was killed, but it wasn't only her father whom she lost. She had brothers. She was the only girl, right? She was the only girl. Yeah. So she had brothers. There were four of them. Robert was one brother, and he was, as a matter of fact, he served in the NKVD, you know, in the security services, and NKVD, as they put it in English, maybe be a blessing, passed away 10 years ago. One brother, Musik, although in his paperwork, he had his birth, whereas Zoya had Draverivka as a place of her birth, but they're twins. Musik подделал что-то, мне кажется. He was a great man. May his memory be a blessing. He lived in San Francisco, no longer with us. So Zoya is the last of the Mohicans of that great generation. Adinka, as I mentioned, 10 years ago, we parted with him. But think about that. Zoya and Adinka were married for 68 years. Like, look, my grandma, she lived 65 and passed away. Some people don't even live that long. It's a lifetime. It was a lifetime of her devotion, taking care of Adinka, taking care of the entire family, because she worked very hard and she worked for herself. So it wasn't nine to 5. She worked as much as was necessary, really. That's how, throughout her lifetime. And she took care of her husband, and she took care of her son. A wonderful, wonderful son, Felix, the only child. And Felix, I know what it's like to be the only child of your mother, because I'm one too. It's different. It's different in a good way. All the love is to you, for you. But also, you know, Mama wants you to accomplish something. Mama lays her hopes for you. But what I want to say is that Zoya was very proud of Felix and loved him very much. She raised a wonderful son. And her daughter-in-law, Mila, I will simply quote. She said, I've known Zoya for 60 years, even before she got married to Felix. You were 16, I think, right, when you met her first. So she said, in the course of the 60 years, we didn't have a bad word between each other. We had a wonderful, respectful relationship. Oh, wonderful grandchildren, Artur and Fred. She was our babushka, you know, the Russian-style babushka, who spent as much time as she possibly could. In other words, always to maximize her time with the grandchildren, and was always very involved in her grandchildren's life. Artur is married to Alla, or Alisa, or Alice in English, and Zoya loved her very much too, and she was blessed with wonderful great-grandchildren of whom she was proud. She lived long enough to see them, Justin and Brandon. So this was a wonderful life, my friends. And Zoya taught us something very simple and very interesting. In order for life to be meaningful, there's no need to participate in a revolution or make big reforms or make a lot of money. In order for life to be meaningful, it is enough to do very simple, but the most important things. Love. Love your family. Love your friends. Love people around you. Love the world. That's all you gotta do. And second, well, be strong. Don't let the misfortunes, even tragedies, don't let any of it bring you down. And then you live well. Zoya certainly has. So today we thank her for all that was timeless and priceless in your life. And we know that our partner with Zoya is only physical. Spiritually, in the most important sense of this word, she will always remain a living presence in our lives. So may Zoya's memory be a blessing. Let us honor Zoya's memory with a moment of silence. Please rise and the moral prayer. אין מלא רחמים שוכם במרומים. עם זה מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכנה. במעלות קדושים ותורים כוזר הרקיעים מעשירים. את נשמת זוהי שלחה לעולמה. בעל הרעמים יסתרע בסתר כנפיו לעולמים. וצור בצור החיים את נשמתה. אדוני הוא נחלתה. ותנוח בשלום על משכבה. ונאמר אמן. God full of mercy, who dwells in the heights. Provide a sure rest on the divine presence's wings, within the range of the holy, pure, and glorious, who shine and resemble the skies, to the soul of our beloved Zoya. The Master of mercy will protect her forever, and will bind her soul in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. Let us all sing. Amen.
The interment's going to take place at Memorial Park Cemetery in Skokie, Illinois. If you're going to go to the, we'll be forming a funeral procession on Big Tree Lane facing east. We will put a flag or sticker on your car. Please drive with your high beam headlights on and your flashers on. At this time, if everybody would please rise.